Hello, everybody, and welcome to Prime Hour June 2025. It's wonderful to have you all here. Maybe we're going to have more people joining us as we go along. Yeah, here it is, more people. But thank you so much for joining us. Please, if you can, turn your cameras on, put yourself off mute, and join us. This is a roundtable and a big conversation that we always try to have here with you. We would love for you to utilize the chat for you to share with each other and introduce each other in the chat. So please, if you feel comfortable with, perhaps you can share your LinkedIn profile, you can share an email if you are willing to do that. This is a great opportunity for engagement. One of the things that we love about Prime Hour is the opportunity to connect with each other and connect with the coaching community. So there are fabulous coaches here in this room. So please reach out and put yourself out there for you to connect with each other. And take note of these emails and these LinkedIn profiles and connect with each other and continue the conversation outside of Prime Hour. All right. So thank you so much for that. Today, I hope that you noticed in the email that we sent, we have a specific topic that Amy and I thought would be interesting for us to explore. Amy, what is the topic?
The topic today is we're going to talk about getting to the source and not getting stuck in the story, right? This area seems to cause some confusion for a lot of coaches as to how do you get there? What is the story? What is the source? And how do you get there? That's it for today.
That sounds interesting to me. Thank you. So
yeah.
Why don't we dive in here, group? What is the meaning here between listening to the source and listening to the story? How do you define that distinction?
I look at the person. I look at their eyes. Somehow that reminds me, it's like, what's going on in there? As they're talking sometimes.
I would add to that, and John raises a great point, but just body language, how they're showing up, how they're coming into the coaching conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes the source evolves from the story, but they may not even be aware of what it is.
Mm-hmm. Love that they may not be aware of what the source really is. Love that, Amy. Yes.
I was thinking for me, I love stories, right? I love people's stories. And when I think about myself, when I'm telling a story, I want to enroll empathy and sympathy, right? So sometimes I'm not thinking that I want a solution. Maybe I want someone to hear me and feel sorry for me, whatever it is that I'm going through. And so the coachee could be doing the same thing. And if we're not careful, we can go into that sort of sympathy, empathy space, and then we'll start solutioning. So the distinction is really powerful, and yeah, that's just my thought.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, good evening from Germany. I think emotions and feelings, in addition to the body language, there are keywords that keep coming up in the sentences, maybe just synonyms for the same thing, frustration, anger, but they keep showing up in the sentences as the story evolves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So patterns, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Quickly, I actually had a a coaching session last week, and I was trying very much, because I love taking notes. I was trying very much not to take notes and just be more present. And she was telling, there were just so many things. The story was just getting bigger and bigger, but the emotions and the feelings, the keywords kept showing up. And then we could just dig, how do you say, below the iceberg. And I realized it was more about the feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Such
great
a
point.
wonderful listening there for me, and noticing the distinction, right? The story. I love when you said the story was getting bigger and bigger, but at the core, there was this feeling. There was something there that was generating this whole story. And this is a good point of evidence for us when we notice that there is this, there is that, there is this, there is all of these things, and we may even think that, oh, it seems disjunct. What is the connection? What is putting everything together? Because it's one person, right? So if it's one person, there is unity there somewhere. What is tethering all of these things together in one point there? That may be the source. Yeah.
And you mentioned emotions too. And I think that's a very important part of getting to the source, is to listen for what are the emotions that are trying to be expressed here. You know, a lot of times, one of my favorite expressions is emotions are the language of the soul. And when people express emotions, they're coming from their deepest part, their deepest thoughts, but they may just be expressing it through story and then with interjections of emotion.
So that is a big distinction for us to be mindful of as coaches, is this distinction between what is on the surface level and what is below the waterline. So on the surface level, maybe the situation, the details, the intricate aspects of what is happening in the moment, the issue that the client is bringing, the challenge that the client is bringing, all of this is there on the surface. But what is truly motivating that, or what is truly motivating the way the client is relating to the situation? That intrinsic motivator is what we are talking about, the source, right? What is making or propelling the client to relate to the situation in this particular fashion. So let me share with you a framework that Amy and I created, and we shared this during our level 1 program when we are talking about listening. And it's what we call the listening framework. And here is just a graphic representation of what I just shared here with you. And it's a way for the students to kind of understand or grasp this idea of the source, the listening for the source. There is the story that the client is bringing, the situation that the client is bringing. There is how the client is relating to that story. And there is the real source, the core of what is truly happening. And we say that it is by paying attention to that source, it is by paying attention to that core aspect, what is truly motivating the relationship that the client is having to this moment in their life, that by being able to support the client into identifying and exploring and expanding more and understanding more of that source, that transformation really happens. So we are not just simply putting a Band-Aid on the situation, finding a simple solution for the situation, but we are supporting the client to understand the intrinsic motivators that are bringing them to relate in that way. And then that particular source, most likely, if it's there, most likely is affecting many different other situations that the client is facing right now, or may face in the future, or may have faced in the past. And because the client was not aware of that, it kept repeating. So by identifying the source and supporting the client to explore that, then there is a transformational aspect that happens, that the client is going to be able to carry it to many other situations as they move forward. So let me stop here. Thoughts and ideas. What comes up for you when you see this listening framework?
Ed just put something in the chat that's interesting. So he wonders if the story changes after transformation. Ed, I'm going to call you out and say, what do you think? I'm sure you've seen it.
My suspicion is that it does, but I can't say that from experience. So I'm sort of curious because I've never really, I always like to coach the person versus the situation. And yet I've never gone back and say, okay, now that we've had this conversation, how does this change for you? And that's, to me, it's a little take home nugget that, ooh, let's go back to the story and see if it's still the same.
Yeah, really important.
I would offer that.
Yeah.
I would offer that maybe it's not so literal, but I mean, I could think of on more than one occasion, but just one coaching client comes to mind that the story of the focus, like what the story was at the beginning of our engagement, whatever it was, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, we don't even talk about it anymore. It's not even present. And so in that way, the story, it's very obvious that there's a level of transformation occurring. And we'll joke about it. We'll sort of say, like, isn't it funny how the thing you thought you were coming for, never even comes up in our dialogue. And so in that way, I sort of, I see how the story changes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cindy, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think for me, I feel like I've heard Elias say, so where is that coming from? And that's what I keep hearing as we're having this conversation is like, that's the going deeper and where is that? And so is that what you're saying is the source, like where that is?
Where is that coming from? You know, we are talking about the story and the story changing, like who creates the story? Right? Situations happen to us, life happens, but the story that is around that situation is created by, you know, who oftentimes it's created by us. We are the ones who are creating the story. So once we are able to notice where this story is coming from, I'm pretty sure that the story may change.
Yeah, Amy just posted, she also believes the changes in the perception of the story or the story significance as it relates to desired outcomes. And that's where we begin to look at the relationship to the story, right? The relationship is mired in their perceptions, their belief systems, their paradigm, all of that. The relation to that story is their construct, right? And the expression of that construct. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think that when we look at this, and let's just look at the whole picture, Elias just had the framework up. When we get to transformation, remember the business we're in here. We're in the business of human potential. And the stories we create for ourselves and our relationships to our stories are what hold us back from achieving our greatest potential. And so that's why this is so important. And remember, this is a listening framework we showed you. Not, a universal law. It's a listening framework that we as coaches have to listen beyond the story. And Lakeisha, I'm with you. I love a good story, man. I can get all wrapped up in that stuff. And because it's fun, right? We're in there, we're messing around in their story. There's drama, there's emotion, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And it's really easy to get hooked by that. But all of those stories are constructs. They're informed by something else. And until we can get down to what they're informed by, shifting to a higher potential is pretty tough because we'll just keep going back to what, and do I say your name, Funmi?
Yes, Funmi, yeah.
Funmi said about patterns, right? We just keep recreating these patterns. We keep recreating similar stories and playing them out the same unless something shoves us out of that. And then to David's point, right? Once we move beyond that construct, that belief construct, now it's not even on our radar anymore. And that means that person has moved to a whole new way of thinking about this and responding to a similar story.
So we've talked about this already here, but I want to emphasize here. Let me ask you a question, group. Like, why are we emphasizing so much the importance and the beauty of listening for the source in coaching? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, so I think for me, the language that I use often is decisions that people are making on autopilot. So they don't even really realize what their source is and where their decisions come from. Us being good listeners helps them to like hit a bump in the road and get off of like their autopilot and relook at their story, their situation, whatever it might be, and maybe come up with a different way to handle it. Could be good, could be worse, but I think that idea of leveling up yourself stems from realizing what you actually are thinking and what the core of your decision making is. So like, one thing that I always remember that Elias taught me is that don't ever step over a word that they share that could be the opener to what they're running on autopilot on. You didn't say it exactly like that, my own words, but these not stepping over the word is the thing that I always remember. So when I'm listening to a story, I'm listening for those words. Like, what are the words that are indicating something deeper than what the situation might be?
I love autopilot. I love that. And don't you call them neon words, Elias?
I like to call them the neon-like words. Those words that you were listening, and all of a sudden, they show up right in front of you, and it's like, oh, there is something about those words. And then you ask. I just came from a coaching session, and this client said the word freer, and then the coach immediately said, "What does freer mean to you?" And the client was able to open that up, and there was so much meaning around that word. If the coach did not ask that question and just assumed, "Oh, I know what freer is," the coach would be preventing that client from exploring the meaning, the deeper meaning of that word for themselves, and get deeper into the source. Yeah. I feel like some of you want to say more. I'm going to give you space.
Yeah, so start talking, you guys.
So just a thought that I'm having, and I'm curious what other people think about this. I also like stories. I've also noticed a pattern that stories can often be problem oriented. And I think it's a watch out for us as coaches to not get stuck in the churn. I mean, this is what we're talking about now, right? We're going deeper. We can't just keep talking about this story and then the next week it's the same issue, but it's a different person. It's the same story. But I mean, that's something for myself and in my coaching, trying to navigate, okay, what's enough information here, and how and when are we going to go deeper and go beyond just the story?
Well, so that's a great segue here. We're going to put you into breakout rooms. And here's what we would love for you to talk within a even smaller group here. What prevents you, or what is in the way for you to listen to the source? Or what is the stretch for you to listen to the source? Okay? So we'll give you 15 minutes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is that good?
Yes.
So let's create breakout rooms here. So how many breakout rooms should we have, Amy?
3. How about 4?
4?
Yeah.
Here. All right. Okay, so 2 groups of 4, 2 groups of 3. Make sure that you give everybody the chance to share, okay? So that you can share with each other. Any questions before we go into breakout room?
15 minutes?
What was it?
Did you say 15 minutes?
Yeah.
About 15 minutes. Yes.
We'll
All
give you a
right.
warning. You're all
Everybody's back. Excellent. So, what happened in this group? I'm curious.
We solved all the world's problems.
You solved all the world's problems.
great. Can I get a manual?
Well, if you all don't mind me sharing, we had a nice discussion about having really verbose clients, and they shared the great podcast you did that I'll listen to about interruptions, because sometimes an ongoing story prevents some of that deeper work, but also going back to some of those, not being afraid to interrupt, but also holding up a mirror when they are repeating certain neon words, and kind of that sometimes jars them out of their story when they realize they're being repetitive about certain word choices or thought patterns, helping them to be aware of that. That's what came to my mind in talking with this group.
Beautiful. Anyone else would like to add here?
Y'all came in with great smiles, so I know you're discussing good stuff. So
my group, we had a nice exchange of all four corners of the earth, which really made it refreshing. We all agreed that our empathy, we all chimed in that empathy sometimes is what we're leading with in those stories, and so the desire to be empathetic can sometimes be a little bit of a distraction. And Ed, I think, made a really lucid point, which was that, we've talked about it before, we kind of need to rein in our results-based thinking, because I think a couple of the folks in our group were sort of saying, well, sometimes you can lead a horse to water, but right, that kind of speech. And Ed pointed out that actually the horse might be really happy right where he's at, on the edge of the, water hole, and drinking or not drinking. So we had a real good full circle on what it means to get to the source. And anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I love the 2 points there of what you brought up here, David. I would love to emphasize here, this idea of being nice. We want to be empathetic to them. So we want to create this nice environment, which is, our role. We are there, to cultivate trust and safety is one of our competencies. But then in overthinking of the empathy and the being nice, and I don't want to interrupt, or the client is going over here, so I don't want to bring a challenge to them, or being afraid of bringing the client to the edge, that may prevent us from noticing what is at the core here. What is at the bottom line of what the client is bringing to the surface. And the other point is the whole aspect of the need to create value, right? So let's solve this problem, because then the client is going to feel that we are great coaches, and then that need to create value prevent us from allowing the practice and the conversation and the process to go deeper, because we want to, show something to the client.
I just want to chime in, because this is the second time this has come up today about empathy getting in the way of getting to the source. And I think this is a good time to make that distinction that we talk about a lot at Prime, is distinction between compassion and empathy. Empathy gets you enmeshed emotionally with their story. And I can see where, we're hearing now a couple of times, this is a deterrent to getting to a deeper level, closer to the source. And we talk about the distinction between empathy and compassion, right? Empathy keeps us enmeshed, but compassion allows us to stand outside the circle and feel for the person, but also, to Elias's point, not to skip over certain words, patterns, phrases, whatever it is, that stand out to us, and to interrupt with the desire to move the client closer to the source. So that distinction, I think, that's come up a couple of times here today. So I think that's important for all of us to keep in mind relative to the source, getting to the source.
I think an underlying theme for our group also was, what does the client really value and want? And I loved your use of the word value, Elias, because I think sometimes we bring our value proposition to the table and maybe cloud our ability to fully relate with that person, because what we might think is valuable, that's just us thinking it's valuable. And I mean, I had a bit of a laugh about one client who thought I was doing a marvelous job with him, and I kept feeling like, wow, we're not breaking through anything. So, and I realized, okay, Ed, suspend your judgment. This is really valuable for that person. And I think Cindy brought up one person just wanted to talk it through. And that was valuable to them. So, and it met their needs. So I think that for me, that was kind of the theme, I think, that emerged in our conversation.
Can I pick up on that a little, Ed? Because I think it's easy for us to do that, but there's an element to this that the client doesn't know what they don't know. And,
yes.
and I'm just going to open the question here of,
yep.
If that's the case, how do we know whether to tend to their value perception or to give them the added value?
Well, the context does matter a little bit, because this was brought up after we talked about, we bring things to them. So it's not like this is absent of the observations of the client in terms of observations of the coach about the client, what we see, but our judgment about was it valuable or not, that's in the eyes of the client. So yes, thank you for that. There was not shyness to bring forward what we saw. Okay. None of this group.
Yeah, no, I like this especially because I do see, this is one of my concerns for our industry, is that so often we will tend to the client's perception of value versus giving added value. And because, that's what they want. Let's just head right into the results. But one of the things we used to say all the time about coaching is they come for the what they want to accomplish, attain, whatever it is, but they stay for the who. Right. And that's where the added value comes in, where they didn't know what they didn't know about coaching.
Oftentimes, when we are in coach training or mentor coaching or any of the learning labs, and then the client comes and says, oh, I want a to-do list. I want a strategy. And then the coach said, well, this is what the client wanted. So I'm just going to support them in finding the strategy or finding the to-do list, which usually is on the surface level. That's what the client wanted. And yes, that's what the client wanted. However, we as professionally trained coaches and coaches who have the listening ears, it's not that we are going to push the client into it. There are more things under below the waterline. We need to go there. It's not that we're going to push there, but we are going to open the door. And because all of that strategy, all of that situation, all of that story comes from a source. There is a source. Where is that coming from? It's present. So our call is to listen to them, to pay attention. And it's not that we are going to identify what the source is, that we have this, great insight and we are going to know exactly what the source. It's not our job to do that. But we know that there is something underneath. And we open the door for that. So when there are the neon words, as I said, for example, or anything, nonverbals that the client might bring, what is in between the line? We are paying attention to all of this, and we are bringing this to the client. Oh, you said this word. Oh, I noticed a shift on your tone when you said that. Oh, you got more animated over here. Oh, there is a silence. What is that about? So we open the door, and some clients are going to be able to dive right in, and they are going to love it. Some clients are not going to be able to go there, but we open the door, and if it is truly something important, it's going to show up again. Maybe in the same session, maybe a week later, maybe 3 months later, maybe a year later. But if it's truly important, it's going to show up again. And then when it shows up again, oh, here comes that word again. What is that about? And then maybe the client in that second time or the third time or the fifth time, the client is able to go there a little deeper. But so our job is not to push them into the source, but our job is to pay attention to when is the source showing up and present this back to them for them to decide where they want to go.
Elias, Lakeisha and I had a great discussion around sitting in curiosity. And that kind of ties in with this. And it makes me think of a story. I'll be very brief, but for context, I am a coach in my day job with a company that has hired me to be a coach, and I coach sales leaders. And sometimes they're very open to coaching, and sometimes they're not. And I have one in particular, Amy, you're probably going to smile because you know this story. I had one in particular, and the first 3 times I would meet with him, arms were crossed, leaning back in the chair, and was a tough guy. And I think it was around our 3rd coaching engagement. He was saying some things, but he was also kind of self-deprecating. And I just leaned in and said,
"You froze."
Did I lose?
And I can tell you, a 30-minute coaching session, first of all, turned into an hour, but then it went from coaching him every 2 to 3 weeks to I'm a priority on his schedule weekly. And because something flipped for him, at the end of it, he did lean in and say a few expletives. What the blankety blank blank just happened? And I said, congratulations, my friend.
You froze right at the punchline.
Oh, no.
So what was it that happened in the 3rd session?
What you said, Amy.
I'm sorry. I think I might have lost you guys. What was the question again?
Repeat what you said to the client. You froze at that moment.
Oh, shoot. I just leaned in and asked him, why did you say it that way? And because he was self-deprecating in his commentary. And the interesting thing was, and I don't know how much of you heard, but basically that coaching conversation that was 30 minutes went for an hour. And where we had been talking every 2 to 3 weeks, I now have a priority time on his calendar weekly. And he has elevated me with why other leaders, just a mind shift of how he was thinking about things. And it was in the very basic, but I was very much in a place of curiosity. And I met him where he was at. Like, I wasn't super nice. Like, why are you doing that? Because he was kind of, so I think a little bit of it is read them and then come at them in a way that they are also ready to receive information. It changed the dynamic for me very much so with him and his peers in that one interaction.
That is fabulous. That's great, fabulous. And what I love about that story, Amy, and thank you for sharing that, is that, the aspect of curiosity. You notice something and you just asked a question about it. It's not that you created your own story about that particular situation that the client was presenting. You just noticed that there was something there and you brought to the client, and then the client went, oh yeah, there is this here. Let's go a layer deeper, right? That is the movement toward the source. And this is the call for us, right? That's why Amy and I brought this topic here for us to discuss is, are we paying attention? Are we paying attention to what is underneath? Because it is there. And what do we need as coaches to open up our ears to notice these points that the client is bringing to us, and we may or we may not be listening because of our own bias or our own fireworks and our own, situation, whatever is happening with us that is preventing us from really listening to the source and being able to bring this back to the client. So that is the challenge for us as we move forward.
Can we just capstone all of this, Elias? Because the one thing we haven't really discussed yet is those intrinsic motivators. And most often, I just want to punctuate everything with this. Most often what we're going to see the source associated with our needs and values. Right, somewhere in there is usually a need or a value that's the intrinsic motivator for whatever it is relative to the story. and their relationship to the story.
Yeah, in our personal integrity process that we have during our level 1 and level 2 program, we talk about these, you know, the things that take us out of alignment and bring us in alignment. And we say in that personal integrity process that the needs and values of every human being is the pillars of this process. When we are grounded and aware of the needs and values that we all have, that support us into moving back and forth into alignment and misalignment. And that is at the core of this source. And what are the needs and the values that the client may be bringing to that coaching conversation that is so present, but we are distracted by the details of the story and not paying attention to that? Is there a way that we can open the door for the client to be more in touch with what is truly motivating them to see that situation from that perspective? Ooh,
juicy stuff, huh?
Juicy stuff. So coaches, what are you taking away from this conversation? Some of you were quiet, but I saw the wheels turning.
Well, I like two metaphors that you used. Opening doors, and as you'd expect with my affinity for boats, below the waterline.
John is a boat person, so that you all know.
I don't want to oversimplify, but I'm grateful for discussions like today, because for me, it's about a reminder of sticking to the basics, not overcomplicating. Like, stick to the basics and follow the formula.
Thank you for that, Amy. Yeah. It's as we say, coaching is simple, but not easy. So it is sticking to the basics.
I wrote down what you said about the need to create value may prevent us from going deeper, because we want to show something to the client. That was helpful.
Excellent. Well, we will have, do we have Prime Hour in July? Yeah, we do have Prime Hour in July, and we are going to look at the specific time. Make sure that you go to our Prime Hour webpage on our website, on primecoaching.com website, and we have all of the Prime Hours all the way till the end of the year. So put those on your calendar so that you have them set on your calendar and blocked out for you to come and join us in this discussion. We will come back next week. We would love
July 10th, by the way.
What was it?
July 10th at noon Eastern.
July 10th at noon Eastern. So put that on your calendar so that we are going to come up with a topic to discuss. If you have a topic that you would like us to address here, please send us an email. Let us know. Elias would love to talk about this during Prime Hour. We would be happy to talk about that particular topic. We would love to send an invitation to all of you to our level 1 or our level 2 programs. It's time for you to continue your coaching education, and we have registration open for our fall program. So don't forget to join and connect with us. And anything else that we want to share with them, Amy?
No, I think that's it. I think you covered everything.
Excellent. And don't forget Prime Space as well. Listen to Prime Space and subscribe and share with others. Otherwise, everyone, I'll see you next time.
See you in July.
Thank you.